The Apache helicopter was on fire. Captain Riley Thompson had 30 seconds before the fuel tanks exploded, 8 wounded soldiers screaming in the back, and a missile lock alarm screaming louder. Her hands didn't shake. They never did. But 2 hours ago, every man in that briefing room had laughed when she volunteered for this mission. They'd called her the diversity hire, the PR stunt. Now she was the only thing standing between 500 American soldiers and a mass grave in hostile territory. Before we dive into Riley's impossible story, hit that subscribe button right now. This is a 2-hour journey you won't want to miss, and I need you here until the very end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where it all started. Riley Thompson's alarm went off at 0430 hours. She didn't need it. She'd been awake since 0300, staring at the ceiling of her quarters, listening to the sound of her own breathing in the dark. Her mind was already running through pre-flight checklists, fuel calculations, weather patterns. That's what 9 years of flying combat helicopters does to you, turns your brain into a machine that never shuts off. She was 31 years old and tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. She sat up, feet hitting the cold floor, and walked to the bathroom mirror. Auburn hair regulation length pulled back tight enough to give her a headache by noon. Green eyes with dark circles underneath. A small scar above her left eyebrow from a hard landing in Afghanistan 3 years ago. The same landing that killed her wingman and got her a Silver Star. Nobody talked about the Silver Star. They talked about how she cried at the funeral. Male pilots were overcome with emotion. Female pilots were too emotional for combat. She splashed water on her face and got dressed. By 500, she was in the chow hall eating scrambled eggs that tasted like cardboard and drinking coffee that tasted worse. Alone. Always alone. Lieutenant Hayes walked past her table with 3 other pilots, all of them laughing about something. Hayes glanced at her, then away, like she was invisible. Riley ate faster. At 0545, she walked to the briefing room at Fort Liberty, her boots echoing in the empty hallway. The base was just waking up, lights flickering on engines starting in the distance, the smell of jet fuel and diesel mixing with the North Carolina humidity. She pushed open the door to the briefing room at 0558. Captain Morrison was already there, standing at the front with his arms crossed, staring at a topographical map on the projector screen. He looked up when she entered. "Thompson?" "Sir?" "You're early." "Yes, sir." Morrison's jaw tightened. He was 42, built like a linebacker, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. He'd been flying Apaches since before Riley graduated high school, and he'd made it very clear from day one that he didn't think women belonged in combat aviation. "Good," Morrison said flatly. "Maybe you can teach the rest of these clowns about punctuality." Riley found a seat in the back row and sat down. Other pilots started filtering in at 0600. Hayes, Carter, Wilson, Martinez, 47 men, all of them loud, joking, slapping each other on the back. The room filled with testosterone and swagger and the kind of confidence that comes from never being told you don't belong. Nobody sat next to Riley. They never did. At 0605, Morrison cleared his throat. The room went quiet. "Gentlemen," Morrison paused, then added with visible reluctance, "and lady, we've got a situation." He clicked the remote. The map on the screen zoomed in on a valley deep in the Hindu Kush mountains, surrounded by jagged peaks and narrow passes. A red circle marked a cluster of grid coordinates. At 0200 this morning, a Joint Special Operations Task Force conducted a raid on a suspected weapons cache approximately 90 kilometers northeast of our forward operating base. The raid was successful, the cache was destroyed, but on extraction they got hit. Morrison clicked again. The screen showed tactical imagery smokefire destroyed vehicles. The enemy was waiting. Ambush from 3 sides. RPGs, heavy machine guns, mortars. Our guys fought their way to a defensive position in this valley, but they're pinned down. 500 personnel. No air support available due to heavy SAM presence on every ridgeline. Weather's turning bad, sandstorm moving in by 1400 hours. And intelligence indicates enemy reinforcements are moving toward the valley. ETA 16 hours. The room stayed silent. Riley leaned forward, her heart starting to pound. Morrison continued. Command is coordinating a ground extraction, but the terrain makes it damn near impossible. Narrow valley, high walls, limited egress routes. Enemy controls the high ground. The only realistic way in or out is by air. Hayes raised his hand. Sir, what about drones? We've sent 3 drones. All 3 were shot down within minutes. This valley is a no-fly zone. SAM sites on every ridge plus mobile anti-aircraft units. Anything that flies gets lit up. Another pilot spoke up. What about Apache support for a ground convoy? Ground convoy would take 12 hours minimum to reach the valley, and they'd be fighting the whole way. Our guys don't have 12 hours. They've got maybe 6 before they're overrun. The room shifted uncomfortably. Wilson, a pilot with 20 years of experience, said what everyone was thinking. So what's the plan, sir? Morrison's face was stone. The plan is we wait for the weather to clear, wait for additional support, and hope to God those men can hold their position. That's not a plan, Hayes muttered. That's the only plan we've got, Morrison snapped. Unless one of you has a better idea. Silence. Riley stared at the map. Her mind was already calculating. 90 kilometers. Apache cruise speed, 150 knots. Flight time approximately 40 minutes. Fuel capacity enough for maybe 8 round trips if she pushed it. SAM sites avoidable if she flew low, used terrain, masking stayed below radar. It was possible. Dangerous as hell, but possible. Her mouth opened before her brain caught up. I'll fly it. The room went dead silent. Every head turned toward her. Morrison blinked. What did you say? Riley stood up, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I'll fly it, sir. I can extract those men. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then someone laughed. It started as a snicker from the back row, then spread like wildfire. Within seconds, half the room was laughing. Hayes shook his head, grinning. Oh man, that's good. Morrison held up a hand. The laughter died down, but smirks remained. Thompson, Morrison said slowly, sit down. Sir, I'm serious. I can sit down. Riley stayed standing. With respect, sir, those men need immediate extraction. I have the flight hours, the training, and the aircraft. I can do this. Morrison's face darkened. You've been flying combat for what, 2 years? 3 years, sir. 3 years, Morrison repeated like it was an insult. 3 years and you think you can fly into the most heavily defended valley in the region, dodge SAMs, extract 500 men under fire, and make it back alive? Yes, sir. Why? Because you saw it in a movie? More laughter. Riley's face burned, but she kept her voice level. Because I'm a pilot, and pilots don't leave soldiers behind. Morrison stepped closer. Listen to me very carefully, Thompson. This isn't a training exercise. This isn't a publicity stunt for the Army's diversity program. This is real bullets, real missiles, real death. You fly into that valley, you will die. And I am not, repeat, not sending you to die just so some general can check a box and feel good about gender equality. The words hit Riley like a physical blow. She took a breath. Sir, I'm not asking you to send me because I'm a woman. I'm asking you to send me because I'm qualified." "You're not qualified for this. I have the same certifications as every pilot in this room." "You have the paperwork," Morrison shot back. "That doesn't mean you belong in combat." The room went silent again. Riley felt something crack inside her chest. Not break crack, like ice on a frozen lake. "Is that an official assessment, sir?" Her voice was quiet, now dangerous. "Or a personal opinion?" Morrison's eyes narrowed. "It's reality, Thompson. And if you can't handle reality, you shouldn't be wearing that uniform." "I can handle reality just fine, sir. The question is whether you can handle a woman saving 500 men when none of your boys will." The room exploded. "Whoa! Did she just out of line?" Morrison's face turned red. "That is enough, Captain." Riley didn't back down. "Then tell me I'm wrong, sir. Tell me one pilot in this room is willing to volunteer for this mission." Morrison turned to the room. "Anyone Hayes, Wilson, Carter?" Hayes looked down at his boots. Wilson suddenly found something interesting on the ceiling. Carter coughed and said nothing. Nobody moved. Morrison turned back to Riley, and for just a second she saw something flicker across his face. Not respect, not agreement, but maybe reluctant acknowledgement. "That doesn't change the answer, Thompson. It's still no." "Why?" "Because when you get shot down, and you will get shot down, I'm not going to be the one standing in front of a congressional committee explaining why I sent a female pilot on a suicide mission. The optics alone would destroy this unit." Riley's throat tightened. "So this is about politics. This is about reality." "No, sir. This is about you being afraid of what people will say if a woman dies doing something a man refused to do." Morrison's jaw clenched so hard Riley could hear his teeth grind. "Get out," he said quietly. "Sir, get out of my briefing room. Now." Riley stood there for one more second, every fiber of her body screaming to keep fighting. But she knew when she'd lost. She turned and walked toward the door. As she reached for the handle, Hayes called out, "Hey, Thompson." She stopped. "For what it's worth," Hayes said, and he wasn't smiling anymore. "I think you'd probably make it farther than most of us. But Morrison's right. It's a death sentence, and nobody's going to blame you for not wanting to die today." Riley looked at him. "I'm not afraid of dying, Hayes. I'm afraid of living knowing I could have saved them and didn't try." She walked out. The door slammed behind her. Riley stood in the empty hallway, her hands shaking now, adrenaline and anger and frustration all mixing together into something that felt like fire in her veins. She pressed her back against the wall and closed her eyes. "You don't belong in combat." Morrison's words echoed in her head, mixing with 1,000 other voices she'd heard over the years. Her flight instructor at Fort Rucker. "Women don't have the upper body strength for combat flying." Her first squadron commander. "You're good, Thompson, but you'll always be a liability in a firefight." Her ex-husband the night before he filed for divorce. "I didn't marry a soldier. I married a woman. But I guess you can't be both, can you?" And underneath all of it, the voice she hated most, the one that sounded like her own. Maybe they're right. Riley opened her eyes. No. No, they weren't right. She pushed off the wall and started walking. Not back to her quarters, not to the chow hall, to the flight line. The sun was just coming up when Riley reached the tarmac. The Apache was already prepped tail, number 847 her bird, the one she'd flown on 37 combat missions without a scratch. Lieutenant Maria Santos was running pre-flight checks, her dark hair pulled back under a maintenance cap. Maria was 26 from El Paso, with a wife and a 2-year-old daughter. She'd been Riley's co-pilot for 8 months, and in that time they'd become something close to friends. As close as you could get when you were the only 2 women in a squadron of 50. Maria looked up when Riley approached. "Hey, heard about the briefing?" "Yeah." "Heard Morrison shut you down hard?" "Yeah." Maria wiped her hands on a rag. "So what are you doing here?" Riley climbed into the pilot's seat and started flipping switches. "Pre-flight check?" Maria stared at her. "Riley, get in the bird, Maria." "Riley, we don't have authorization to—" "I know." "If we take off without clearance, that's a court-martial. For both of us." "I know." Maria climbed up onto the Apache's frame, leaning in close. "Then what the hell are you doing?" Riley's hands paused on the controls. She looked at Maria. 500 men are going to die today," Riley said quietly. "Not because we can't save them, but because nobody's willing to try. And I can't live with that, Maria. I can't go to sleep tonight knowing I had the chance and I didn't take it." Maria's expression softened. "Riley, this isn't your fault. Morrison made the call. Morrison made the wrong call. Maybe, but it's not your job to fix it." "Then whose job is it?" Riley's voice rose. "Who's supposed to save them, Maria? Who?" Maria didn't answer. Riley took a breath, forcing herself to calm down. "Look, I'm not asking you to come with me. This is my decision, my risk. You can walk away right now and nobody will blame you. But I'm flying, with or without you." Maria stared at her for a long moment. Then she sighed and climbed into the co-pilot seat. "You're insane," Maria muttered, strapping herself in. "Yeah," Riley said. "I know. We're both going to get court-martialed. Probably. My wife is going to kill me. I'll explain it to her. She's not going to listen. She thinks you're a bad influence." Riley smiled despite everything. "She's not wrong." Maria shook her head, but she was smiling too. Okay. Let's do this before I change my mind. What's the plan?" Riley's hands moved through the startup sequence muscle memory, smooth and precise. "We fly low, stay below radar, use terrain masking through the mountain passes. When we reach the valley, we find a landing zone, load as many wounded as we can fit, and get the hell out. And the SAM sites, we avoid them. And if we can't avoid them, then we hope our countermeasures work." "That's a terrible plan. You got a better one?" Maria was quiet for a second. Then, No, I don't." The engines roared to life, turbines, whining rotors starting to spin. Riley's hands tightened on the controls. This was it, the point of no return. She thought about her father. Colonel James Thompson, Army Aviation, killed in action in Iraq when Riley was 16. The last thing he'd said to her before deploying was, "The sky doesn't care if you're brave or scared, kiddo. It only cares if you're good enough. So be good enough." Riley took a breath. "I'm good enough, Dad." She pulled back on the collective. The Apache lifted off the ground. They were 30 seconds in the air when the radio crackled to life. "Apache 847, this is Tower Control. You are not cleared for takeoff. Return to base immediately. Acknowledge." Riley switched off the radio. Maria glanced at her. "You just ignored Tower Control." "Yep. That's a big deal, Riley." "I know. Like career-ending big deal." "I know." The radio crackled again. "Apache 847, this is Captain Morrison. Thompson, if you can hear this, turn that bird around right now. That is a direct order. Acknowledge." Riley reached over and pulled the radio circuit breaker. Silence. Maria stared at her. "Did you just radio malfunction?" Riley said calmly. "Happens all the time." "Oh my God." "Focus, Maria. I need you on navigation. Plot me the lowest route through the mountains. Stay below 500 feet. If we pop up on radar, we're dead. Maria swallowed hard, then pulled up the nav display. Okay. Heading northeast bearing 047. There's a canyon system that'll keep us low, but it's narrow, maybe 50 feet clearance on each side. I'll take it. They dropped low, skimming over the desert, the Apache's shadow racing across the sand beneath them. Riley's hands were steady on the controls, but her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Maria's voice was tight. Riley, what if we're wrong? What if Morrison was right, and this is suicide? Riley didn't answer right away. Then quietly, then at least we tried. They flew in silence for 5 minutes. Then Maria spoke again. My daughter's birthday is next week. She's turning 3. Riley glanced at her. Maria, I'm not saying I regret this. I'm saying I want to make it back. For her. We will. You can't promise that. No, Riley admitted. But I can promise I'll do everything in my power to get us home. Maria nodded slowly. Okay. They entered the canyon system walls of rock rising up on both sides so close Riley could see individual cracks in the stone. She flew by instinct, making micro-adjustments every second, threading the needle through gaps that seemed impossibly narrow. Maria's hands were white-knuckled on her armrests. Jesus, Riley. Talk to me, Maria. Keep me updated. Right. Fuel at 1,847 pounds, weapon systems green, countermeasures loaded chaff and flares 16 each. That's not a lot if we take heavy fire. It'll have to be enough. They flew for another 15 minutes, weaving through canyons, staying low, staying invisible. Then Maria's display blinked. Riley, I've got something on radar. Multiple contacts. 15 kilometers ahead. Riley's grip tightened. Enemy aircraft? No, ground targets. Lots of them. I think it's the valley. Riley's heart skipped a beat. They were close. She pushed the Apache faster. The canyon opened up ahead, and suddenly they could see its smoke rising in black columns, tracer fire, streaking across the sky like angry fireflies, explosions lighting up the ridges. And somewhere down there, 500 American soldiers were fighting for their lives. Maria's voice was barely a whisper. Oh my God. Riley's jaw set. Maria, I need you to do exactly what I say. No hesitation. Can you do that? Yes? Good, because we're going in. The Apache crested the ridge and the valley opened up beneath them. It was hell. Burning vehicles scattered across the valley floor. Bodies she couldn't tell if they were enemy or friendly. Machine gun nests on every ridge, muzzle flashes winking in the smoke. And in the center, a cluster of American vehicles arranged in a defensive circle, surrounded on 3 sides. Maria's voice cracked. Riley, there's no way. There's no landing zone. There's always a way. Riley dove. The Apache dropped like a stone, falling 1,000 feet in seconds, the ground rushing up to meet them. Alarms started screaming. Missile lock! Missile lock! Countermeasures! Riley shouted. Maria slammed the button. Flares shot out from the Apache, bright magnesium stars arcing through the air. A missile streaked past them, missing by 20 feet, drawn away by the flares. Second lock. More flares. Another missile missed. Riley pulled up hard, leveling out 50 feet above the valley floor, racing toward the defensive position. Bullets pinged off the Apache's armor. Tracer rounds streaked past the canopy. Riley, we can't land here. We'll be torn apart. Watch me. Riley spotted a small clearing behind the American lines, maybe 30 feet wide, barely enough room for the Apache's rotor span. She brought the helicopter in hot flaring at the last second, the skid slamming into the ground hard enough to rattle her teeth. The moment they touched down, soldiers started running toward them. A sergeant with blood on his face yanked open the crew compartment. "Who the hell authorized this?" "Nobody!" Riley shouted over the rotor noise. "Load your wounded, now!" The sergeant stared at her for half a second, then started barking orders. "You heard her. Wounded first move. Move. Move!" Soldiers appeared carrying men on stretchers. Burns, gunshot wounds, missing limbs. Riley counted them as they loaded. 2, 4, 6, 8. "That's all we can fit," Maria shouted. "Lieutenant," a voice yelled from outside. A captain uniform, torn face blackened with smoke. "You can't be here," Command said. "No air support." "Command was wrong," Riley shouted back. "How many wounded do you have?" 47 critical. Another 100 walking wounded. We'll be back. You'll never make it. The SAMs. Let me worry about the SAMs. Just get your men ready." The captain stared at her, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition. Or maybe just desperate hope. "Copy that, Lieutenant. We'll be ready." Riley looked at Maria. "We good?" Maria checked the load. "As good as we're gonna get." Riley pulled back on the collective. The Apache lifted off, rising straight up through a storm of bullets. Missile lock. Flares. The first missile missed. Second lock. Flares. The second missile missed. They cleared the ridge, dropping back into the canyon, the wounded men in back groaning with every jolt. Maria's voice was shaking. "Riley, we just flew into a war zone, loaded wounded under fire, and flew back out." "Yeah, that's insane." "Yeah, we're going back, aren't we?" Riley's hands were rock steady on the controls. "We're going back until every one of those men is out." Maria laughed, a half-hysterical sound. "We're definitely getting court-martialed." "Probably. And possibly killed. Maybe." "Okay." Maria took a breath. "Okay. Let's do it again." Riley smiled. They flew back toward base, the wounded soldiers silent in the back, holding on to life by sheer will. Riley's mind was already calculating. 8 men per trip. 47 critical wounded. That's 6 trips minimum. Plus the walking wounded, another 12 to 15 trips. They'd need every ounce of fuel, every flare, every second of luck. But they'd do it. They had to. Because 500 men were counting on them, and Riley Thompson didn't leave anyone behind. The Apache screamed through the canyon, racing against time, racing against death, racing against every voice that had ever told her she wasn't good enough. Maria's voice came through the headset, quiet now. "Riley, yeah, thank you. For making me come, for believing we could do this." Riley's throat tightened. "We're not done yet, Maria." "I know. But still, thank you." They flew in silence for a moment. Then Riley said, "Maria, when we get back, when your daughter asks what you did today, yeah, tell her you saved lives. Tell her you didn't give up. Tell her courage isn't the absence of fear, it's flying anyway." Maria was quiet. Then, "Copy that." The base appeared on the horizon. Riley brought the Apache in hard and fast, landing in a cloud of dust. Medics were already running toward them, pulling the wounded from the helicopter. And standing at the edge of the landing zone, arms crossed, face like thunder, Captain Morrison. Riley shut down the engines and climbed out. Morrison was on her in 3 seconds. "Thompson, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Riley pulled off her helmet hair, plastered to her head with sweat. "My job, sir." "Your job. Your job. You disobeyed a direct order. You stole a multi-million-dollar aircraft. You flew into a combat zone without authorization." "Yes, sir." "You are done, Thompson. Done. I am going to have you court-martialed, stripped of rank, and thrown in the stockade. Do you understand me?" Riley met his eyes. Sir, with respect, 500 men are still in that valley, and I'm going back to get them. Morrison's face turned purple. Like hell you are. Sir, you can court-martial me when this is over, but right now those men need me, and I'm not asking your permission anymore. She turned back toward the Apache. Morrison grabbed her arm. Thompson, I will have MPs arrest you right now. Then do it. Riley pulled her arm free. Arrest me. Throw me in the stockade, but then you explain to those 500 soldiers why you stopped the only pilot willing to save them. Morrison stared at her. The medics were loading the wounded into ambulances. One of them, a kid couldn't be more than 20 with burns covering half his face, looked at Riley as they carried him past. Thank you, he whispered. Riley nodded. Morrison's jaw worked. He looked at the wounded soldier, then back at Riley. One condition, he said finally. Sir, I'm coming with you. Riley blinked. Sir, you heard me. If you're going back, I'm going with you. Somebody has to keep you from getting yourself killed. For the first time all day, Riley smiled. Yes, sir. Morrison turned to the crew chief. Rearm that bird. Full load. And I want it done in 5 minutes. Sir, now. The crew scattered. Morrison looked at Riley. You're still getting court-martialed when this is over. I know, sir. And you're certifiably insane. I know that too, sir. Morrison almost smiled. Almost. Let's go save some soldiers, Captain. Riley climbed back into the Apache. Maria was already in the co-pilot seat, running through the startup sequence. Morrison squeezed into the crew compartment. Riley looked at Maria. You ready? Hell no. Not even a little bit. They both laughed. The engines roared back to life. And Captain Riley Thompson, the woman who wasn't supposed to be there, the pilot who wasn't supposed to fly combat, the soldier who wasn't supposed to matter, lifted off into the storm to prove them all wrong. The second trip was worse. Riley knew it would be the moment they cleared the canyon and saw the valley again. The smoke was thicker now, darker, like the whole world was burning. The tracer fire had intensified streams of red and green cutting through the black haze, searching for targets, searching for them. Morrison's voice crackled through the headset from the crew compartment. Jesus Christ. Yeah, Riley said. Maria's hands were moving across her displays, tracking threats, counting targets. I've got 12 No-15 SAM sites active. They're painting us already. They can't lock on if they can't see us, Riley said. She dropped the Apache lower, hugging the canyon walls, flying so close to the rock face that Morrison actually swore. Thompson, you're gonna clip the rotor. No, I'm not. You're 30 feet from the wall. I know exactly where I am, sir. The Apache screamed through the canyon, Riley's hands, making constant micro-adjustments, her eyes flicking between the terrain ahead and the instruments, her brain calculating angles and distances faster than any computer. Maria's voice was tight. Coming up on the valley mouth in 30 seconds. Morrison, you ready back there? Riley asked. Ready for what? To get shot at. Oh, fantastic. 20 seconds. Riley's heart was pounding, but her breathing stayed steady. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Just like her father taught her when she was 16 and learning to fly. Fear is just information, Riley. It tells you you're alive. It doesn't tell you what to do. You tell you what to do. 10 seconds. Here we go, Riley said. They burst out of the canyon into the valley, and immediately alarms started screaming. Missile lock! Missile lock! Missile lock! Flares! Riley barked. Maria hit the button. Flares erupted from the Apache, 12 burning stars scattering across the sky. 2 missiles streaked toward them, heat seekers tracking the flares, detonating in brilliant orange fireballs that rocked the Apache sideways. Third lock! Maria shouted. Chaff! Maria punched another button. Strips of aluminum exploded from the helicopter, confusing the radar-guided missile that was tracking them. It veered off, slamming into a ridge and exploding. Morrison's voice from the back. "How many countermeasures do we have left?" 14 flares, 11 chaff, Maria said. "That's not enough for—" "It's what we've got," Riley shouted. She dropped the Apache even lower, racing across the valley floor at 50 feet, weaving between burning vehicles, using the terrain to break line of sight with the SAM sights. Bullets pinged off the armor. Something hit the tail boom with a metallic clang that made Riley's teeth clench. "Tail rotor," she asked. Maria checked her instruments. "Still functional. We're okay." They weren't okay. Riley could feel it in the controls, a slight vibration that hadn't been there before, a tiny bit of play in the pedals. Something was damaged. Not catastrophically, not yet, but they were flying on borrowed time. She pushed the thought away. The defensive perimeter was ahead, American vehicles in a tighter circle, now fewer of them than before. She could see bodies scattered around the position. Too many bodies. Riley brought the Apache in, hard flaring at the last second, the skids hitting the ground so hard that Morrison grunted in pain. "You call that a landing?" he shouted. "You're alive, aren't you?" Soldiers were already running toward them. The same captain from before, his uniform even more torn now, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. He leaned into the crew compartment. "You came back?" "Told you I would," Riley said. "Load up? We've got 8 more critical. Then move them." "We don't have time." The captain started barking orders. Soldiers appeared with stretchers, moving fast, despite their exhaustion, their fear. Riley counted them loading. 1, 2, 3. Morrison climbed out of the crew compartment, and for a second Riley thought he was abandoning the mission. Then she saw him grab one end of a stretcher, helping lift a wounded soldier into the Apache. The captain stared. "Sir, you're—" "I'm helping," Morrison snapped. "Keep moving." 4, 5, 6. An explosion rocked the perimeter, a mortar round landing 50 yards away, close enough that Riley felt the shockwave. "We need to go," Maria shouted. "Not yet." Riley could see more wounded being carried toward them. 7, 8. Another mortar. Closer this time. Dirt and shrapnel peppered the Apache's armor. Morrison climbed back into the crew compartment. Thompson were loaded. "Copy." Riley pulled collective, and the Apache lifted off, struggling under the weight. The engine strained, the vibration in the tail rotor getting worse. "Come on, baby," Riley whispered. "Come on." They cleared the perimeter by 20 feet, bullets chasing them, and then Riley dove not up and out, but down and away, staying low, using the terrain. Missile lock. Flares. The missile missed. Second lock. Chaff. Another miss. They made it back to the canyon, back to relative safety, and Riley finally let herself breathe. Maria's voice was shaking. "That was too close. We made it. Barely. Barely counts." Morrison's voice from the back. "Thompson, we've got a man back here who's not breathing. We need to get him to the medics now." Riley pushed the Apache faster, maxing out the airspeed, the helicopter shaking and groaning in protest. They made it back to base in 18 minutes, 4 minutes faster than the first trip. The medics were waiting. They pulled the wounded out fast, working on the man who wasn't breathing right there on the tarmac. Riley watched through the canopy as they performed CPR. Willing the man to live, willing her risk to mean something. After 2 minutes, the medic looked up and nodded. He was breathing. Riley closed her eyes for just a second. Morrison climbed out, walked around to her side of the Apache. "You broke every safety protocol that exists." "Yes, sir." "You flew recklessly, endangered the aircraft, and nearly got us all killed." "Yes, sir." Morrison paused. Then, "Good, do it again." Riley looked at him. For the first time, there was something different in his eyes. Not quite respect. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. "Fuel?" Morrison asked. "Enough for 4 more trips," Maria said. "Maybe 5 if we get lucky." "Then let's not waste time." The crew chief ran up. "Sir, the tail rotor's damaged. We need at least 30 minutes to—" "You've got 5 minutes," Morrison said. "Make it work." "Sir, if that rotor fails mid-flight, then we'll deal with it. 5 minutes. Go." The crew chief ran. Riley pulled off her helmet, sweat pouring down her face. Her hands were shaking now, adrenaline wearing off, reality setting in. Maria looked at her. "You okay?" "Yeah, you. Ask me when this is over." Morrison was standing a few feet away, talking into a radio. Riley could hear fragments of the conversation. "Yes, sir. I understand. No, sir. I'm not asking for permission, because they'll all be dead by then. Yes, sir, I take full responsibility." He turned off the radio and walked back to them. "Command wants us to stand down," he said flatly. Riley's stomach dropped. "Sir, I told them no." Riley stared at him. Morrison's face was unreadable. "I told them we're already committed. Mission's too far along to abort. By the time they send MPs to stop us, we'll have everyone out." "They're gonna crucify you, sir," Maria said quietly. "Probably. But those men in that valley don't care about my career, and neither do I." Morrison looked at Riley. "You started this, Thompson. Let's finish it." The crew chief came running back. "Tail rotor's patched, but it's not pretty. You've got maybe 3 more flights before it goes critical." 3 more flights, Riley repeated. "How many men left in the valley?" Morrison checked his notes. 39 critical wounded, approximately 90 walking wounded. Riley did the math. 8 men per trip. 3 trips. 24 men. Not enough. "We'll make it work," she said. "How? We'll figure it out." They climbed back into the Apache. The engines started. The rotors spun up. And Riley lifted off for the 3rd time. This time she knew what to expect. The valley was hell. The SAMs were waiting. The bullets would find them. But she also knew something else. She was good enough. The flight back to the valley took 15 minutes. Riley flew faster now, more aggressively pushing the Apache to its limits. The damaged tail rotor vibrated constantly, a reminder that they were flying on borrowed time. Maria was watching her threat display like it was the only thing in the world. "SAM sites are active. They're waiting for us." "They can wait all they want." "Riley, they're going to be ready this time. They know our approach now." "Then we'll change it." Riley studied the map on her display. Every other trip they'd come in from the west through the main canyon. Predictable. Safe. Time to stop being safe. "We're going in from the north," Riley said. Maria's head snapped up. "The north approach is over open ground, no terrain masking. We'll be exposed for 40 seconds. I know. That's suicide. That's unexpected. They'll be watching the canyon. We'll be somewhere else." Morrison's voice. "Thompson, the north approach." "I know what I'm doing, sir." "Do you—" Riley didn't answer. She banked the Apache hard to the right, breaking away from the canyon route, heading out over open desert. Maria was praying under her breath. Riley couldn't hear the words, but she recognized the cadence. The valley appeared ahead. No cover. No protection. Just open sky between them and the enemy. 40 seconds, Riley said. "That's all we need." She pushed the Apache to maximum speed, 182 knots faster than she'd ever flown in combat. 20 seconds. No alarms yet. The SAM sites hadn't spotted them. 15 seconds. Still nothing. 10 seconds. "They see us," Maria said. "Multiple locks. Not yet, not yet." 5 seconds. "Missile lock, multiple locks. Flares, chaff, everything." The Apache became a fireworks display, flares and chaff exploding in every direction, filling the sky with decoys and confusion. 3 missiles launched. 2 went for the flares. 1 kept tracking. It's still locked. Riley jinked hard. Right then, left the Apache responding like an extension of her own body. The missile streaked past, missing by 15 feet. They dove into the valley, dropping below the ridgeline, and suddenly they were safe again, or as safe as you could be in a war zone. Riley's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might burst. "Holy shit," Maria whispered. "Yeah." Morrison's voice was tight. "Don't ever do that again." "No promises, sir." They landed at the perimeter. Soldiers loaded the wounded. Riley counted. 1, 2, 3. The captain leaned in. "We're running out of time. Enemies massing on the eastern ridge. We're going to be overrun in the next hour." "How many men can still fight?" Riley asked. "Maybe 60. The rest are wounded or dead." 60 men against however many were coming. Not good odds. 4, 5, 6. An RPG streaked overhead, exploding against the ridge behind them. 7, 8. "That's all we can fit," Maria shouted. Riley looked at the captain. "Can you hold for another 2 hours?" The captain's face was grim. "We'll hold as long as we can." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I've got, Lieutenant." Riley nodded. "Then hold. We're coming back." She lifted off. They made 4 more trips over the next 90 minutes. Each trip the same fly in through hell, land under fire load, the wounded fly out through. Worse. The tail rotor was screaming now, the vibration so bad that Riley had to fight the controls constantly to keep the Apache flying straight. "We're not going to make it," Maria said on the 6th trip back to base. "Yes, we are?" "Riley, look at the instruments. Hydraulic pressure's dropping. Tail rotor's at 40% efficiency. We're 1 bad hit away from falling out of the sky." "Then we don't take a bad hit." "That's not how—" "Maria." Riley's voice was calm but firm. "I need you focused. Can you do that?" Maria took a shaky breath. Yeah, I can do that." "Good. Because we're not done." They landed at base. The crew chief took one look at the Apache and shook his head. "This bird's done. You need to ground it." "How many more flights can we get?" Morrison asked. "Sir, with respect, you shouldn't get any more flights. The tail rotor's held together with duct tape and prayer. If it goes, you're dead." "How?" "Many. More. Flights." The crew chief looked at the damage, then at Morrison, then at Riley. "1, he said finally. "Maybe, if you're lucky and God's feeling generous." Morrison turned to Riley. "How many men left?" 63. "And we can carry 8 at a time." "Yes, sir." Morrison did the math. "We can't get them all out in 1 trip." "No, sir." "So what do we do?" Riley stared at the Apache, thinking. Her mind was racing, running through options, discarding them as fast as they appeared. Then she had it. "We take the worst wounded," Riley said. "Anyone who can't walk can't fight. We load them first. The rest, the walking wounded, the men who can still hold a rifle, they stay and hold the perimeter." "For how long?" "Long enough for us to come back with a second bird." Morrison's eyes narrowed. "There is no second bird. Command's grounded everything else." "Then we fix this one and go back." "Thompson, the crew chief, just said—" "I heard what he said. But those men don't have a choice, sir. So neither do we." Morrison stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned to the crew chief. "How long to replace the tail rotor?" 4 hours minimum." "You've got 2. And I don't want to hear that it's impossible. Make it happen." The crew chief opened his mouth, then closed it. Yes, sir. Morrison looked at Riley. This is insane. Yes, sir. We're gonna die. Maybe. And you're okay with that? Riley met his eyes. Are you, sir? Morrison almost smiled. Let's go save some more soldiers, Captain. They made the 7th trip with the Apache held together by desperation and mechanical genius. The new tail rotor wasn't properly calibrated, making the helicopter want to spin constantly. Riley had to fight it every second, her arms burning with the effort. But they made it. They landed in the valley one more time, and this time something was different. The soldiers weren't just loading wounded anymore. They were standing in formation, 63 men, battered and bloody, but standing tall, weapons ready. The captain approached Riley's window. We're ready. For what? Whatever comes next. Riley looked at the men. Some of them couldn't have been older than 20. Others looked like they'd been fighting wars since before Riley was born. All of them looked at her like she was something more than just a pilot. Like she was hope. We'll be back in 3 hours, Riley said. Can you hold? The captain's jaw set. We'll be here. Riley loaded the last of the critically wounded 8 men who wouldn't survive another hour without medical care. As they prepared to lift off one of the soldiers, a kid with corporal stripes and both arms in makeshift slings stumbled toward the Apache. Ma'am, he called out. Riley looked at him. Thank you, the kid said. His voice cracked. My brother's in one of those helicopters you already took out. The medic said you saved his life. So, thank you. Riley's throat tightened. She couldn't speak. She just nodded. The Apache lifted off for the 7th time. They were halfway back to base when the tail rotor failed. There was no warning. 1 second Riley was flying normally. The next, the Apache started spinning violent, uncontrolled rotation, the world becoming a blur of sky and ground and sky again. Tail rotor failure! Maria screamed. Morrison was shouting something from the back, but Riley couldn't hear him over the alarms, over the sound of her own blood rushing in her ears. The Apache was spinning faster now, completely out of control, dropping like a stone. Riley's training kicked in. Cut the throttle. Auto-rotate. Use the main rotor like a parachute. But with no tail rotor, she had no anti-torque. Nothing to stop the spin. They were going to crash. Riley's hands moved across the controls, making adjustments that shouldn't work, couldn't work, trying to find some combination of inputs that would give her even a shred of control. The ground was rushing up. 500 feet, 400, 300. Riley, Maria's voice, 200 feet. Riley did something she'd never done before, never even heard of anyone doing. She shut down one engine. The Apache's twin turbines suddenly became a single turbine. The torque changed. The spin slowed, not stopped, but slowed. 100 feet. Riley restarted the engine. The Apache lurched, the spin tightening again, but she'd bought herself 3 seconds. She used those 3 seconds. Collective up. Cyclic forward. Pedal useless, but she tried anyway. 50 feet. The Apache hit the ground. Not a crash. Not quite. The skids caught the sand, dragged, caught again. The helicopter bounced, spun one more time, and finally stopped. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then Maria started laughing, a wild, hysterical sound. We're alive! Oh my God, we're alive! Morrison's voice from the back. Thompson? What the hell was that? Riley's hands were shaking so badly she couldn't unbuckle her harness. That was me figuring out how to fly without a tail rotor. That's impossible. I know. They sat there for another moment, the Apache's single remaining engine winding down the desert, silent around them. Then Riley looked at her instruments. They'd made it 10 kilometers from the valley, 14 kilometers from base, right in the middle of nowhere. So, Maria said. What now? Riley started unbuckling. Now we walk. They walked for 20 minutes before Morrison spoke again. You know this is enemy territory, right? Riley kept her eyes on the horizon, scanning for threats. Yes, sir. And we're 3 people with 2 sidearms and no radio. Yes, sir. And those men in the valley have maybe 90 minutes before they're overrun. Riley's jaw tightened. I know, sir. Morrison was quiet for a moment. Then, so what's the plan? We get to base. We get another helicopter. We go back. In 90 minutes. In whatever time we have left. Maria was limping. She'd twisted her ankle on the landing, but she hadn't said anything until Morrison pointed it out. Now she was trying to hide it, trying to keep up, but Riley could see the pain on her face. Maria, how bad is it? Riley asked. I'm fine. That's not what I asked. Maria stopped walking. It hurts, but I can manage. Riley turned to Morrison. Sir, stay with Maria. I'll move ahead, try to find us transport. Morrison shook his head. We stay together. That's not negotiable. Sir, every minute we waste. I said we stay together, Captain. Those are my orders. Now move. They kept walking. The desert was brutal. Heat waves rising off the sand. No shade. No water. Riley's mouth felt like sandpaper, her throat raw. She could feel her uniform sticking to her skin, sweat running down her back. Behind them she could see the crashed Apache, a broken silhouette against the sand smoke still rising from the damaged tail rotor. $37 million of military hardware destroyed. Her career definitely destroyed. But 8 more men were alive because of that flight. Worth it. They walked for another 10 minutes. Then Maria stopped. Hold up, she whispered. I hear something. Riley froze, listening. An engine. Distant, but getting closer. Morrison pulled his sidearm. Could be friendly. Could be, Riley agreed. But she pulled her own weapon anyway. The engine got louder. Then they saw it, a dust cloud on the horizon moving fast. Riley's heart started pounding. Friend or enemy? No way to know until it was too late. Spread out, Morrison ordered. Don't give them a group target. They moved apart 20 feet between them, weapons raised. The vehicle appeared a Humvee moving at high speed, American markings visible on the hood. Friendly. Riley nearly collapsed with relief. The Humvee skidded to a stop 30 feet away. A sergeant jumped out, rifle raised, then lowered it when he saw their uniforms. Lieutenant Thompson, the sergeant called out. That's me, Riley said. The sergeant jogged over. He couldn't have been older than 25 with a fresh face that looked like it had never seen combat. Ma'am, Captain Morrison, we've been looking for you. Command sent us out when your bird went dark. Morrison holstered his weapon. How'd you find us? Saw the smoke from your crash. Figured you'd be walking this direction. The sergeant looked at the 3 of them. You all okay? We're alive, Maria said. That's about all I can promise. The sergeant nodded toward the Humvee. Come on, let's get you back to base. Riley was already moving toward the vehicle. How fast can this thing go? Ma'am. How fast? 60, maybe 70 on flat ground. Then let's move. We've got 63 men who don't have time for a scenic drive. They piled into the Humvee. The sergeant gunned it, and they took off across the desert, the vehicle bouncing over rocks and dips, throwing them around inside. Morrison was on the radio now, talking to base. This is Morrison. We're inbound ETA 20 minutes. I need a bird prepped and ready to fly the second we arrive. I don't care what it takes. I don't care who you have to wake up, make it happen. A voice crackled back. Sir, all aircraft are grounded by order of I don't care what the order says. We have 63 men in that valley and they're out of time. Get me a bird or I'll steal one myself. Silence on the other end. Then, copy that, sir. We'll have Apache 623 ready. Morrison turned to Riley. You good to fly again? Riley's whole body hurt. Her arms felt like lead. Her head was pounding from dehydration. But she met Morrison's eyes and said, Yes, sir. You're lying. Yes, sir. But I'll fly anyway. Morrison almost smiled. Then he looked at Maria. Santos, you're grounded. That ankle needs medical attention. Sir, I can... That's not a request, Lieutenant. You've done your part. Thompson and I will take it from here. Maria's face fell, but she nodded. Yes, sir. Riley reached over and squeezed Maria's hand. You were the best co-pilot I've ever had. Past tense. Maria tried to smile. You planning on not making it back? I'm planning on making it back and buying you a drink. You better. The Humvee raced across the desert. Riley watched the sun climbing higher in the sky. Every minute that passed was a minute those men in the valley didn't have. She thought about the kid with the slings on his arms, the one whose brother she'd saved. She wondered if he was still standing, still fighting, still hoping she'd come back. The base appeared on the horizon. The sergeant pushed the Humvee harder. They arrived in a cloud of dust. The moment the vehicle stopped, Riley jumped out and started running toward the flight line. Morrison was right behind her. Thompson, wait. But Riley wasn't waiting. She could see Apache 623 on the tarmac rotors already spinning crew chief doing last-minute checks. She sprinted across the pavement, her legs burning her lungs, screaming, and climbed into the cockpit. Morrison hauled himself into the co-pilot seat, moving faster than a man his age and size should be able to move. The crew chief appeared at Riley's window. Ma'am, this bird's got full fuel and a full weapons load, but I gotta tell you, I heard about that landing you made with no tail rotor. That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Riley strapped herself in. Which one do you think it was? The crew chief grinned. Both. Bring her back in one piece, okay? I'll try. Riley's hands moved through the startup sequence. This Apache felt different from her usual bird, slightly heavier on the controls, the instruments laid out just a little differently. But a helicopter was a helicopter. She'd make it work. Morrison was on the radio. Command, this is Morrison. We're taking off in 60 seconds. I'm declaring this a combat rescue emergency under Section 12 of the... Captain Morrison, this is Colonel Hayes. Stand down immediately. That's a direct order. Morrison's face went hard. Sir, with respect, I can't do that. You can and you will. I've already got 2 helicopters destroyed, 1 pilot facing court-martial, and a diplomatic incident brewing because you've been conducting unauthorized flights into hostile territory. Stand down. Sir, we have 63 men. I'm aware of the situation, Captain, and I'm telling you that Command has decided the risk is too high. We're pulling those men out by ground convoy. A ground convoy will take 8 hours. Those men don't have 8 hours. That's not your decision to make. Morrison looked at Riley. His face said everything. This was it. The end of the line. Orders were orders, but Riley's hands were already on the controls. Sir, Riley said into the radio, her voice calm. This is Captain Thompson. With respect, I'm not under your command. I'm already facing court-martial, so I've got nothing to lose. Thompson, do not. Riley pulled collective. The Apache lifted off. Colonel Hayes was shouting something, but Riley switched off the radio. Morrison stared at her. Thompson, you just... I know what I just did, sir. They're gonna throw you in Leavenworth. Probably. They might throw me in there, too. Sorry, sir. Morrison was quiet for a second. Then he started flipping switches, checking instruments, getting ready for combat. Well, since we're both going to prison anyway, let's make it count. Riley pushed the Apache to maximum speed. They flew in silence for 5 minutes. Then Morrison spoke. "Thompson, can I ask you something? Sir, why are you doing this? Really, and don't give me the speech about duty or honor. I want the truth." Riley kept her eyes forward. "You want the truth?" "Yeah. The truth is, I spent my whole career being told I didn't belong, that I wasn't strong enough, wasn't tough enough, wasn't good enough. Every single day, I had to prove myself. And even when I did everything right, it was never enough. I was still just the girl, the diversity hire, the PR stunt." Morrison didn't interrupt. Riley continued. "So when I heard about those men in that valley and I saw everyone in that briefing room look away, I realized something. This wasn't about proving I belonged. This was about proving they were wrong. About me. About women in combat. About everything." "That's a heavy burden to carry," Morrison said quietly. "Yeah, it is." Riley's voice cracked slightly. "But you know what's heavier, living with yourself, knowing you could have saved them, and you didn't try." Morrison was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "For what it's worth, Thompson, you've already proved them wrong. The men in this unit, me, everyone. You've proved it a dozen times over." Riley's throat tightened. "Thank you, sir. And when we get back, if we get back, I'm going to tell that to every board, every court-martial, every congressional committee they put in front of me. Even if it means I end my career defending yours." Riley couldn't speak. She just nodded. They flew on. The valley appeared on the horizon. From 5 kilometers away, Riley could already see the difference. More smoke, more fire. The fighting had intensified. Morrison checked his weapons display. "We're loaded for bear. 30mm cannon, 19 Hydra rockets, full ammo. If anyone tries to shoot us down, we can shoot back." "Good, because they're definitely going to try." Riley's hands tightened on the controls. This was it, the last flight. One way or another, this ended here. They approached from the south, this time, coming in fast and low. The SAM sights opened up immediately, 4 missile launches, all tracking. "Flares!" Riley shouted. Morrison hit the button. The flares deployed and 3 missiles took the bait. But the 4th kept coming. "It's locked! It's still locked!" Morrison's voice was tight. Riley banked hard, pushing the Apache into a dive that made her stomach drop. The missile followed. 200 meters. 100. 50. At the last possible second, Riley pulled up hard and simultaneously cut throttle. The Apache stopped in midair, a maneuver called the hammerhead, dangerous as hell, usually only done in air shows. The missile overshot, streaking past them, confused by the sudden velocity change. It exploded against a ridge 200 meters away. Morrison was breathing hard. "Where the hell did you learn that?" "YouTube," Riley said. "You're lying." "Yeah, but it sounded better than, I made it up just now." They dropped into the valley. The defensive perimeter was smaller now, vehicles pushed closer together, bodies everywhere. Riley could see enemy fighters moving between positions, getting closer, tightening the noose. She brought the Apache in so fast that the skids were sparking on the rocks before she'd even fully landed. The captain was there immediately, his uniform torn, his face covered in dirt and blood. "You came back," he said. He sounded surprised. "Told you I would," Riley said. "Load up everyone who can't walk, get them on now." Soldiers started moving, but slower than before. They were exhausted, shell-shocked. Some of them looked like they could barely stand. Morrison climbed out to help. Riley stayed in the cockpit, watching the ridges, counting threats. Enemy fighters were closing in. She could see them moving between rocks, setting up firing positions. They had maybe 5 minutes before this position was overrun. "Morrison, we need to move. Almost there." Soldiers were loading into the crew compartment. Riley counted them. 1, 2, 3. An explosion rocked the perimeter close, so close that shrapnel pinged off the Apache's canopy. 4. 5. Enemy fire was getting heavier. Bullets everywhere kicking up dirt around the helicopter. 6. 7. "That's it!" Morrison shouted. "We're full." Riley looked at the captain. "How many men are left?" The captain's face was grim. 56. 56 men, and Riley could only carry 7 at a time. The math was brutal. 8 trips. Even if they flew flat out, even if nothing went wrong, it would take 4 hours to get everyone out. They didn't have 4 hours. They had minutes. Riley's mind raced. There had to be a way. There had to be Riley Morrison's voice. "We have to go." But Riley was staring at the Apache's weapons systems. 30mm cannon, 19 rockets, enough firepower to level a city block. An idea hit her. Crazy. Impossible. But maybe. "Morrison, get back here." Morrison climbed back into the co-pilot seat. "What are you—" "I'm not leaving," Riley said. Morrison stared at her. "What? I'm not leaving? Not yet." Riley pointed at the eastern ridge where enemy fighters were massing. "We've got enough ordnance to hold this position for another hour. Maybe 2 if we're smart. That's enough time for a ground convoy to get here." Thompson Command already said, "Command can go to hell. These men don't have anyone else, so we stay, we fight, and we hold until help arrives." Morrison looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "You want to turn this Apache into a fixed gun emplacement?" "Yes, sir." "Against several hundred enemy fighters?" "Yes, sir." "With no support, no backup, and no guarantee anyone's even coming?" "Yes, sir." Morrison shook his head. Then he checked his weapons display. "We've got maybe 40 minutes of continuous fire. After that, we're out of ammo." "Then we make those 40 minutes count." The captain appeared at Morrison's window. "Ma'am, sir, what's happening?" Riley looked at him. "We're staying. We're going to give you air support until ground forces arrive." The captain's eyes widened. You're what?" "We're staying," Riley repeated. "But I need you to do something for me. I need you to get on the radio and tell command that they have 1 hour to get a convoy here, or they're going to lose 63 soldiers and 2 pilots. Tell them that, word for word." The captain hesitated. Then he nodded and ran. Morrison was already locking in targets on his display. "I've got 37 enemy positions marked. Priority targets are the heavy weapons on the eastern ridge." "Copy. I'll take the ridge. You handle anyone who gets close to the perimeter." "This is insane." "I know. We're probably going to die." "Yeah." Morrison looked at her. "Hell of a way to end a career, Thompson." Riley smiled. "Hell of a way to start a legend, sir." She squeezed the trigger. The 30mm cannon roared to life, spitting fire and death. Rounds tore into the eastern ridge explosions, blossoming where enemy fighters had been seconds before. Morrison fired rockets 1, 2, 3, each one streaking toward a target, each one finding its mark. The enemy scattered, confused, trying to figure out where the attack was coming from. Riley gave them no time to think. She walked the cannon across their positions, methodical, precise, deadly. For 10 minutes, it was like something out of a movie. The Apache hovering over the battlefield, raining destruction on the enemy, the sound of the cannon a constant roar that shook the desert. Enemy fighters tried to return fire, but Riley kept moving up, down, left, right, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. Morrison was calling out targets. 500 meters north-northeast, heavy machine gun. Riley adjusted, fired. The machine gun position disappeared in a cloud of dust and fire. 300 meters east, RPG team, fire. Adjust. Fire again. They worked together like a machine. Morrison spotting Riley, shooting both of them operating on pure adrenaline and instinct. But ammunition was finite, and the enemy was infinite. After 20 minutes, Morrison's voice was tight. "We're at 60% ammo." "Copy. Riley, we can't keep this up forever. We keep it up until help arrives. And if help doesn't arrive..." Riley didn't answer. They kept fighting. 30 minutes in, Morrison called out 40%. The enemy was regrouping now, adapting to the Apaches' tactics. They were spreading out, making themselves harder targets, forcing Riley to use more ammunition to achieve the same results. Riley's arms were screaming. Her eyes burned from staring at the targeting screen. Her whole body felt like it was vibrating from the constant recoil of the cannon, but she kept firing. 35 minutes. 20% ammo. Riley's finger never left the trigger. "We're good. We're good." But they weren't good. She knew it. Morrison knew it. They were running out of time. 40 minutes. 10%. The enemy was closing in again, emboldened by the decreasing fire from the Apache. They were moving between positions, getting closer to the perimeter, preparing for a final assault. The captain's voice came over the radio, crackling with static. "Lieutenant Captain Command says ground convoy is 30 minutes out. Repeat, 30 minutes." 30 minutes. Riley looked at her ammunition counter. She had maybe 3 minutes of firing time left. Morrison saw it too. "Riley, I know. We can't hold for 30 minutes. I know. We need to leave. Now. Load up whoever we can and..." "No." Riley's voice was firm. "We hold. We buy them every second we can. Riley, listen to me." "No, sir, you listen to me." Riley turned to look at Morrison. Her face was streaked with sweat and dirt, but her eyes were clear. "I didn't fly into hell 7 times just to leave these men now. We hold. If we run out of ammo, we use the helicopter as a shield. If the helicopter gets destroyed, we grab rifles and fight on the ground. But we don't leave. Not until every single one of these men is safe." Morrison stared at her. Then quietly, "You really are the bravest person I've ever met, Thompson. Or the stupidest. Both." Morrison turned back to his display. "All right, let's finish this." They fired their last rounds. The cannon went silent. The rockets were gone. The Apache was a $50 million piece of metal with no ammunition and no defenses. Riley set it down on the ground right in the center of the perimeter between the enemy and the American soldiers. "Everyone behind the helicopter," Morrison shouted. "Use it as cover." The soldiers scrambled, positioning themselves behind the Apache's armored bulk. Riley and Morrison climbed out, grabbed rifles from the soldiers, and took up positions on either side of the bird. The captain appeared next to Riley, blood running down his face from a fresh wound. "Ma'am, this is crazy." Riley chambered around. "You got a better idea, Captain." He didn't. The enemy started advancing. Slowly, at first, testing, probing. Then faster, as they realized the Apache wasn't firing anymore. Riley sighted down her rifle. "Here they come." The first enemy fighter appeared over a ridge 200 meters out. Riley fired. He went down. More appeared. 20. 30. 50. The soldiers opened fire. The air filled with the crack of rifles, the shouts of men, the whistle of incoming rounds. Riley fired, reloaded, fired again. Her world narrowed to the simple mechanics of combat sight. Breathe, squeeze, repeat. She lost track of time. Seconds or minutes or hours, she couldn't tell. She lost track of how many rounds she fired, how many targets she hit. She just kept fighting. Next to her, Morrison was doing the same, and behind them, 63 American soldiers who refused to die. Then through the chaos, she heard it. Engines. heavy engines getting closer. She risked a glance over her shoulder and saw them 6 strikers cresting the western ridge, guns blazing, American flags flying. The cavalry had arrived. The enemy fighters saw them too. They hesitated, then broke scattering back into the rocks. The strikers rolled into the perimeter, soldiers jumping out, setting up a defensive line. A Colonel Riley didn't recognize jumped down from the lead vehicle. "Who's in charge here?" The captain pointed at Riley. "She is, sir." The colonel looked at Riley, covered in dirt and blood, holding a smoking rifle, standing in front of a shot-up Apache with no ammunition. "You Lieutenant Thompson?" "Yes, sir." The colonel shook his head in disbelief. "Command's been trying to reach you for 2 hours." "Radio's out," Riley lied. "Well, you just bought yourself a congressional hearing, Lieutenant, and probably a court-martial." The colonel paused. "But first, let's get these men home." Riley nodded. She was too tired to feel relief. Too numb to feel anything. Morrison appeared next to her. "We did it." "Yeah." Riley's voice was barely a whisper. "We did it." The soldiers started loading into the strikers. Every single one of them, all 63 alive, going home. The kid with the slings on his arms walked past Riley, supported by 2 other soldiers. He looked at her and tried to salute, but couldn't lift his arms. Riley saluted him instead. As the last soldier climbed into the last striker, the captain approached Riley one more time. "Ma'am, I just want you to know what you did today." He couldn't finish the sentence. His voice broke. Riley put a hand on his shoulder. "Get your men home, Captain. That's all the thanks I need." The captain nodded and climbed into the striker. Riley stood there in the desert, watching the convoy roll out, Morrison beside her, the sun setting behind them. "Think they'll really court-martial us?" Morrison asked. Riley smiled, tired but genuine. "Oh, absolutely." Was it worth it? Riley thought about the 8 wounded soldiers from the first flight, the 7 from the second. All the faces she'd seen, all the lives she'd touched. 500 men going home to their families. "Yeah," Riley said. "It was worth it." They stood there for another moment. Then Morrison said, "Come on, Thompson, let's go face the music." They climbed into the last striker, and it rolled out of the valley, leaving behind 2 destroyed Apaches, a battlefield scarred by combat, and a story that would be told for generations. The ride back to base took 90 minutes, and Riley didn't speak for 89 of them. She sat in the back of the striker Morrison, across from her, both of them, covered in dust and dried blood that wasn't theirs. The other soldiers in the vehicle kept glancing at her, like she was something they couldn't quite believe was real. Riley stared at her hands. They were shaking now, the adrenaline finally wearing off, leaving behind the exhaustion and the reality of what she'd done. 7 unauthorized flights into hostile territory. 2 destroyed helicopters worth $74 million. Direct disobedience of multiple orders from multiple superior officers. She'd violated so many regulations she'd lost count, and she'd do it all again. Morrison finally broke the silence. "You okay?" Riley looked up. "Ask me in a week." "Fair enough." The striker hit a bump, jostling everyone inside. One of the wounded soldiers groaned, and a medic moved to check on him. Riley watched the medic work, remembering all the wounded faces she'd loaded into her Apache. 47 men who would have died if she hadn't flown. Maybe more. Worth it. The thought kept repeating in her head like a mantra. Worth it, worth it, worth it. Morrison leaned forward. "Thompson, when we get back, they're gonna separate us. Different interrogations, different hearings. But I want you to know something." Riley met his eyes. "I'm going to tell them the truth," Morrison said. "All of it. How you volunteered when nobody else would. How you saved those men when I said it was impossible. How you proved every single person in that briefing room wrong." He paused. "Including me." Riley's throat tightened. "Sir, you don't have to—" "Yeah, I do. Because you were right and I was wrong. And if I don't say that now, I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it." One of the other soldiers spoke up, a staff sergeant with gray in his beard and 3 purple hearts on his chest. "Ma'am, if it means anything, every man in that valley owes you his life. And we won't forget that, ever." Other soldiers nodded, murmured agreements. Riley didn't trust herself to speak. She just nodded. The base appeared on the horizon, and Riley's stomach dropped. She could see military police vehicles already waiting at the gate. This was it. The end of her career, possibly the end of her freedom. The striker rolled through the gate and stopped. The rear door opened, and bright sunlight flooded in. 2 MPs stood there, hands on their holsters. "Captain Riley Thompson," one of them said. Riley stood. "That's me." "Ma'am, you're to come with us. By order of Colonel Hayes." Riley climbed out of the striker. Morrison started to follow, but the second MP held up a hand. "Just Captain Thompson, sir." Morrison's face darkened. "Like hell." "It's okay, sir," Riley said quietly. She looked at Morrison, tried to smile. "See you on the other side." Morrison looked like he wanted to argue, but he just nodded. "Give him hell, Thompson." The MPs escorted Riley across the base. She could feel eyes on her from every direction, soldiers stopping to stare, whispers following in her wake. Some of them looked angry. Others looked something like awe. They brought her to the base headquarters down a hallway she'd never been in before, and into a small room with concrete walls, a metal table, and 3 chairs. One of the MPs gestured to a chair. "Wait here." Then they left, and Riley was alone. She sat down and waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 20. Riley's mind wandered. She thought about Maria, wondering if her ankle was okay, if she was facing the same interrogation. She thought about her father, wondering what he would think of what she'd done. She thought about all the voices over the years that had told her she didn't belong, and she wondered if they were right after all. The door opened. Colonel Hayes walked in. He was 50-something, built like a tank with iron-gray hair and a face that looked like it had been chiseled from granite. Behind him came a woman in a civilian suit. Probably JAG, the Judge Advocate General's Corps military lawyers. Hayes sat down across from Riley. The woman stood in the corner, tablet in hand. "Captain Thompson," Hayes said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Do you understand why you're here?" "Yes, sir." "Do you understand the severity of your actions?" "Yes, sir." Hayes leaned back in his chair. "Tell me what happened. From the beginning. And don't leave anything out." Riley took a breath and started talking. She told him about the briefing, about volunteering, about Morrison's refusal, about taking the Apache without authorization and making the first flight. Hayes's expression never changed. She told him about the second flight, the third, the tail rotor failure, the crash, about walking through the desert and taking a second helicopter. Hayes's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. She told him about the final stand in the valley, about using the Apache as a gun emplacement, about fighting on the ground when the ammunition ran out. When she finished, the room was silent. Hayes stared at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Yes, sir. I saved 500 men." "You destroyed 2 helicopters worth $74 million. You disobeyed direct orders from multiple superior officers. You conducted unauthorized military operations in hostile territory. You endangered the lives of your co-pilot Captain Morrison and every soldier in that valley." Riley met his eyes. With respect, sir, those soldiers' lives were already endangered. I didn't put them in that valley. I got them out. Hayes's face turned red. You don't get to make that call, Captain. You don't get to decide which orders to follow and which to ignore. That's not how the military works. Then maybe the military needs to work differently, sir. The words were out before Riley could stop them. Hayes stood up so fast his chair fell backward. You arrogant! He caught himself, took a breath, sat back down. Captain Thompson, you have destroyed your career. You will be court-martialed. You will likely be dishonorably discharged. You may face prison time. Do you understand that? Yes, sir. And you're okay with that? Riley thought about the kid with the slings, about the captain who'd said thank you, about 8 wounded soldiers per flight times 7 flights times 500 men going home to their families. Yes, sir, she said quietly. I'm okay with that. Hayes stared at her like she was speaking a foreign language. Then he stood up. You're confined to quarters pending formal charges. MPs will escort you. Dismissed. Riley stood saluted and turned to leave. As she reached the door, Hayes spoke again. Thompson. She stopped. For what it's worth. Hayes said, his voice softer now. What you did out there. I've been in the Army for 30 years, and I've never seen anything like it. Riley turned to look at him. Is that a compliment, sir? Hayes's expression was unreadable. I honestly don't know. The MPs escorted Riley to her quarters, a small room with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out over the flight line. They told her she wasn't allowed to leave, wasn't allowed to communicate with anyone, and posted a guard outside her door. Then they left her alone. Riley sat on her bed and finally let herself cry. Not from fear, not from regret, just from exhaustion. From the weight of everything that had happened in the past 12 hours, from the knowledge that she'd given everything she had, and it still might not be enough. She cried for 10 minutes, then washed her face, changed into clean fatigues, and lay down on the bed. She was asleep in 30 seconds. She woke up to someone knocking on her door. It took her a second to remember where she was, what had happened. Then it all came rushing back. The knock came again. Come in, Riley called out. The door opened. Maria walked in limping slightly, her ankle wrapped in a heavy bandage. Riley sat up. Maria, what are you? I told the guard I was your lawyer, Maria said with a slight smile. He didn't ask for credentials. Despite everything, Riley laughed. You're gonna get in trouble. Yeah, well, I'm already in trouble. Figured I might as well make it count. Maria sat down on the desk chair. How are you holding up? I'm okay. Maria gestured to her ankle. Sprained. Doctor says I'm grounded for 6 weeks. She paused. They questioned me for 3 hours. What did you tell them? The truth, that you saved 500 men while everyone else stood around with their thumbs up their asses. Maria's voice was fierce. And that if they court-martial you, they're out of their damn minds. Riley smiled. How'd they take that? About as well as you'd expect. Maria leaned forward. Riley, there's something you should know. The story's getting out. About what you did. Someone leaked it to the press. It's all over the news. Riley's stomach dropped. What? Social media's going crazy. Captain Thompson is trending. People are calling you a hero. There are protests forming outside the base demanding they don't court-martial you. Riley put her head in her hands. Oh, God. It gets worse. Or better, depending on how you look at it. Congress is getting involved. 3 senators have already called for hearings. The Secretary of Defense is being asked to comment. This is a nightmare. This is history, Riley. Maria's voice was intense. You didn't just save those men. You changed the conversation about women in combat. Forever. Riley looked up. I didn't do this to make a point about women. I know. But you made the point anyway. Maria stood up, wincing slightly. Listen, I gotta go before they realize I'm not actually your lawyer. But Riley, whatever happens next, you didn't just do the right thing. You did the impossible thing, and that matters. She limped to the door, then stopped and looked back. My wife wants to meet you, by the way. She says anyone brave enough to make me do something that stupid deserves a home-cooked meal. Riley felt her eyes getting wet again. Tell her I'd like that. Maria smiled and left. Riley spent the next 3 days in her quarters waiting. The MP outside her door changed every 8 hours, but the routine stayed the same. Breakfast at 0700, lunch at 1200, dinner at 1800. No visitors, no phone calls, no information. On the 4th day, the door opened, and a full bird colonel walked in. Not Hayes, someone Riley didn't recognize. He was carrying a folder. Captain Thompson, I'm Colonel Brennan, Judge Advocate General's office. I've been assigned as your defense counsel. Riley stood. Sir, I didn't request. You don't get a choice. This is a high-profile case, and the Army wants to make sure everything's done by the book. Brennan sat down, opened the folder. I've reviewed the evidence. I've read the statements. And I'm going to be honest with you, Captain. From a legal standpoint, you're screwed. Riley sat back down. That's encouraging, sir. But from a moral standpoint, you're a hero, and that's our angle. Brennan pulled out a document. The charges: unauthorized use of military equipment, disobeying direct orders, reckless endangerment, destruction of government property. They're hitting you with everything. What's the likely outcome? Worst case, dishonorable discharge and 5 years in Leavenworth. Best case, other than honorable discharge and time served. Riley's mouth went dry. And if I plead guilty, don't. Brennan's voice was sharp. The second you plead guilty, you lose all leverage. We fight this. We make them prove every charge. We put Morrison on the stand. We put those soldiers you saved on the stand. We make the prosecution explain why saving 500 American lives is a crime. Is it, though, legally? Brennan was quiet for a moment. Yes. Technically, what you did was illegal. You broke the chain of command. You disobeyed orders. You operated outside your authority. He paused. But sometimes the law is wrong, and when that happens, it takes someone brave enough to break it to change it. I wasn't trying to change anything, sir. I was just trying to save lives. I know. That's what makes you dangerous to them. Dangerous how? Brennan leaned forward. Because if they acknowledge that you were right, that disobeying orders was the correct thing to do, then they have to acknowledge that the system failed, that every officer who refused to fly that mission was wrong, that the chain of command itself was wrong, and they can't admit that without undermining the entire structure of military authority. Riley understood. This wasn't about her. It was about protecting the system. Brennan stood. Your court-martial is scheduled for 2 weeks from now. Until then, stay quiet. Don't talk to anyone. Don't give interviews. Let me handle the legal strategy. Yes, sir. Brennan walked to the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, Captain, my daughter's in flight school right now. She wants to fly Apaches just like you. And because of what you did, nobody's going to tell her she can't. He smiled slightly. So, thank you. After he left, Riley sat alone with her thoughts. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to wait and wonder if she'd end her career in a courtroom wearing handcuffs instead of wings. She thought about calling someone her mother, maybe, or one of her old flight instructors. But what would she say? How do you explain that you'd destroyed your entire life for a principle? The knock on her door came at 1900 hours. Riley expected another MP, another lawyer, another official with bad news. Instead, Captain Morrison walked in. He looked older than he had 4 days ago. tired, but his eyes were clear. "Sir." Riley started to stand, but Morrison waved her down. "At ease, Thompson." He sat down across from her. "How are they treating you?" "Like a prisoner, sir." "Yeah, me too." Morrison rubbed his face. "They questioned me for 6 hours yesterday. Wanted to know every detail. Every order I gave, every order you disobeyed." "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That you saved 500 men when I said it was impossible. That you flew 7 missions into hell and brought everyone home. That you're the bravest pilot I've ever seen." Morrison met her eyes. "And that if they court-martial you, they better court-martial me too. Because I was there for the last 3 flights. I made the same choices you did." Riley's throat tightened. "Sir, you don't have to." "Yeah, I do." Morrison's voice was firm. "I spent 30 years in this army, Thompson. 30 years following orders, playing it safe, doing everything by the book. And you know what? When it mattered, when lives were actually on the line, I froze. I chose regulations over people. I was wrong. You came back, sir, on that last flight. Because you shamed me into it." Morrison smiled bitterly. "You made me remember why I became a soldier in the first place. Not to follow orders, to protect people." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Morrison pulled something from his pocket, a small black box. He opened it, revealing a pair of silver wings. "These were my father's," Morrison said quietly. "He flew B-17s in World War II. Shot down over Germany, spent 2 years in a POW camp. When he got home, he told me something I never forgot. He said the hardest part about being a soldier isn't following orders. It's knowing when not to." He held out the wings to Riley. "I want you to have these." Riley stared at them. "Sir, I can't." "You can. You earned them." Morrison's voice was thick. "My father would have loved what you did out there. And I think he would have wanted you to have these." Riley took the wings with shaking hands. They were old, worn, the silver tarnished in places. But they felt heavy with history, with meaning. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. Morrison stood. "The court-martial's in 2 weeks. When you get up on that stand, you tell them exactly what you told me. No apologies, no regrets. You did the right thing, Thompson. Don't let anyone tell you different." He walked to the door, then paused. "Oh, and Thompson, when this is over and you will get through this, you're going to have a choice. You can let this break you, or you can let it define you. Choose wisely." Then he was gone. Riley sat there holding Morrison's father's wings, thinking about choices and consequences and what it meant to be a soldier. She thought about her own father killed in Iraq when she was 16. His last words to her echoing in her memory. "The sky, it doesn't care if you're brave or scared, kiddo. It only cares if you're good enough." Riley looked at the wings in her palm. "I was good enough, Dad," she said to the empty room. "I was good enough." The days crawled by. Riley spent them reading, exercising, and preparing for the court-martial. Brennan visited every other day, with updates, all of them bad. The prosecution was stacking the charges. They had testimony from Colonel Hayes about her disobedience. They had documentation of every regulation she'd violated. But Brennan also told her about the other side. About the soldiers from the valley who were volunteering to testify on her behalf. About the hundreds of letters flooding into the base demanding she be exonerated. About the growing media circus outside the gates. "You're becoming a symbol," Brennan said. "And symbols are dangerous. They can inspire people, or they can be made into examples." "Which one am I going to be?" Riley asked. "That depends on the next 2 weeks." On the 10th day, Riley got an unexpected visitor. The MP knocked and opened the door, and Maria walked in again, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her was the kid with the slings. except his slings were gone, now replaced with bandages on his arms. "Ma'am," the kid said. His voice cracked. "I hope it's okay that I came. The lieutenant said—" "It's fine," Riley said, standing. "What's your name, soldier?" "Corporal Eddie Martinez, ma'am. I wanted to thank you for saving my brother. He made it home. He's gonna be okay." Riley felt something break open in her chest. "I'm glad." Eddie stepped closer. "Ma'am, they're saying you might go to prison for what you did, for saving us." His eyes were wet. "That ain't right. It's complicated, Corporal." "No, ma'am, it ain't." Eddie's voice was fierce now. "You saved my brother. You saved all of us. And if they punish you for that, then the whole system's broken." Riley couldn't speak. Eddie pulled something from his pocket, a crumpled piece of paper. "My brother wrote this. He wanted you to have it." Riley took the paper and unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, probably written with a hand that was still healing. "Captain Thompson, I don't know if I'll ever get to say this to your face, but I need to write it down. When you landed in that valley, I was sure I was going to die. We all were. But then I heard your helicopter, and I saw you land under fire, and I realized something. Heroes are real. They're not just in movies or books. They're real people who make impossible choices. You're my hero, Captain Thompson. And whatever happens next, I'll spend the rest of my life telling people what you did for us. Thank you for bringing me home. PFC, Michael Martinez." Riley's vision blurred with tears. She folded the letter carefully and held it against her chest. "Tell your brother." Her voice cracked. "Tell him it was an honor." Eddie nodded, unable to speak, and Maria led him out. Riley sat back down on her bed, holding the letter, holding Morrison's father's wings, holding on to the knowledge that whatever the court-martial decided, she'd already won the only battle that mattered. She'd brought them home. All of them. The night before the court-martial, Riley couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through everything that was about to happen. At 0300, she gave up on sleep and sat at her desk. She pulled out a piece of paper and started writing. Not a defense, not an explanation. A letter to her father. "Dad, I don't know if you can read this wherever you are, but I need to write it anyway. I did something crazy, something you probably would have done too. I broke the rules to save lives, and now I'm going to face the consequences. I'm not scared, at least not of the court-martial. What scares me is the thought that maybe I was wrong, that maybe all those people who said I didn't belong were right. But then I remember what you told me about being good enough. And Dad, I was good enough. I flew into hell 7 times and brought everyone home. I proved I belong. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that I made you proud. I hope I did anyway. I miss you, every day. Love, Riley." She folded the letter and put it in her pocket. Tomorrow she'd face a courtroom full of officers who wanted to make an example of her. But tonight, she was just a pilot who'd done the impossible. And that was enough. The courtroom was packed. Riley walked in at 0800 sharp, flanked by 2 MPs, wearing her dress uniform with every ribbon and medal she'd earned in 9 years of service. Her shoulders were back, her head high, but her heart was hammering against her ribs. The room fell silent as she entered. On one side sat the prosecution 3 JAG officers, with briefcases full of evidence and regulations she'd violated. On the other side sat Colonel Brennan, her defense counsel looking calm despite the odds stacked against them. And in the gallery, packed shoulder to shoulder, were soldiers. Dozens of them. Some she recognized from the valley, others she'd never seen before. All of them wearing their uniforms, all of them sitting at attention. Morrison was there, front row. Maria, too, her injured ankle propped up. The captain from the valley. Eddie Martinez and his brother Michael, both in dress blues. Riley felt something catch in her throat. The bailiff called out, "All rise for the presiding officer." Everyone stood. A major general walked in, 3 stars on his shoulder, 60 years of military experience in the lines on his face. General Marcus Whitfield, a legend in Army aviation, a man who'd flown in Vietnam, Desert Storm, and Iraq. He took his seat at the bench. "Be seated." Everyone sat. Whitfield looked at Riley for a long moment. His expression was unreadable. "Captain Riley Thompson," he said, his voice like gravel. "You stand accused of multiple violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. How do you plead?" Riley stood. "Not guilty, sir." A murmur ran through the courtroom. The lead prosecutor, a colonel named Davidson, stood up. "Your Honor, the evidence in this case is overwhelming. Captain Thompson admitted to every action she's accused of. She took military aircraft without authorization. She disobeyed direct orders from multiple superior officers. She destroyed $74 million in government property. This is not a complex case. The facts are clear." Brennan stood. "Your Honor, the facts are indeed clear. Captain Thompson saved 500 American lives when no one else would. She risked her career, her freedom, and her life to bring our soldiers home. If that's a crime, then this court needs to reconsider what we're really fighting for." Davidson's face reddened. "Your Honor, we cannot have a military where every soldier decides which orders to follow based on their personal judgment. That's called anarchy. And we cannot have a military," Brennan shot back, "where following orders is more important than saving lives. That's called tyranny." Whitfield held up a hand. "Gentlemen, save your closing arguments for later. Let's proceed with testimony." He looked at Davidson. "Call your first witness." Davidson stood. "The prosecution calls Colonel Robert Hayes." Hayes walked to the stand, was sworn in, and sat down. Davidson approached. "Colonel Hayes, on the morning of the incident, you were the base commander at Fort Liberty, correct?" "Yes." "And you gave Captain Thompson a direct order not to fly into the valley." "I did." "Can you explain why you gave that order?" Hayes shifted in his seat. "The valley was heavily defended. Multiple SAM sites, anti-aircraft weapons, enemy forces on all sides. We'd already lost 3 drones trying to get surveillance footage. Command assessed the risk as too high for a manned rescue operation." "And Captain Thompson disobeyed that order?" "Yes." "Not once, but 7 times?" "Yes." Davidson nodded. "No further questions." Brennan stood and approached the stand. "Colonel Hayes, how many American soldiers were in that valley?" 500. "And if Captain Thompson hadn't flown those 7 missions, how many of them would have survived?" Hayes was quiet for a moment. "Probably none?" "Probably none," Brennan repeated. "So Captain Thompson's disobedience saved 500 lives." "Objection," Davidson said. "Speculative." "Overruled," Whitfield said. "Answer the question, Colonel." Hayes met Riley's eyes across the courtroom. "Yes, her actions saved 500 lives." "Thank you, Colonel. No further questions." The prosecution called more witnesses. The crew chief who'd warned Riley about the damaged tail rotor. The tower controller she'd ignored. Each one testified that Riley had broken regulations, ignored procedures, operated recklessly. Each one also admitted that her actions had saved lives. By noon, the prosecution rested. Whitfield called a recess. Riley sat in a small room with Brennan eating a sandwich she couldn't taste. "They're building a strong case," Brennan said. "But so are we. When we put those soldiers on the stand, when they tell their stories, it's going to be hard for any judge to throw you in prison." "But not impossible," Riley said. "No, not impossible." They went back in at 1300. Brennan stood. "The defense calls Captain James Morrison." Morrison walked to the stand. He looked directly at Riley as he was sworn in. Brennan approached. "Captain Morrison, you were Captain Thompson's commanding officer, correct?" "Yes." "And you initially refused her request to fly the rescue mission?" "I did." "Why?" Morrison took a breath. "Because I thought it was suicide. I thought she'd be shot down within minutes. And I thought," he paused, "I thought she was volunteering for the wrong reasons, to prove something about being a woman in combat." "And were you right?" "No." Morrison's voice was firm. "I was wrong about all of it. She volunteered because she's a soldier, because soldiers don't leave anyone behind. And she succeeded because she's the best damn pilot I've ever seen." Brennan nodded. "You eventually joined her on the final missions. Why? Because she made me remember what being a soldier actually means. It's not about following orders blindly. It's about protecting people. And that's exactly what she did." No further questions. Davidson stood for cross-examination. "Captain Morrison, you participated in unauthorized flights with Captain Thompson. Are you aware that makes you complicit in her violations?" "Yes." "And you're willing to face the same charges?" "Absolutely." Davidson frowned. No further questions. Brennan called witness after witness. Maria testified about Riley's skill and courage under fire. The soldiers from the valley testified about watching her land under enemy fire, about the hope they felt when they heard her rotors about going home to their families because of her. Eddie Martinez took the stand and broke down crying as he described watching his brother loaded into Riley's helicopter, knowing he was going to survive. The captain from the valley testified that Riley had fought beside them on the ground, that she'd stayed when she could have left, that she'd earned the respect of every man in his unit. By the time Brennan rested his case, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Whitfield called another recess. Riley sat alone in the holding room, exhausted. She'd heard hours of testimony, relived the mission a dozen times, watched grown men cry as they described what she'd done. But she still didn't know if it was enough. Brennan walked in. "They're going to call you to testify. Davidson wants you on the stand." Riley nodded. "I'm ready. Remember what we discussed. Answer honestly. Don't get defensive. Let the facts speak for themselves." "I understand." They walked back into the courtroom. Whitfield looked at Riley. "Captain Thompson, please take the stand." Riley walked forward, was sworn in, and sat down. Davidson approached, papers in hand. "Captain Thompson, let's cut through the emotion and talk about facts. You took a military helicopter without authorization. Yes or no?" "Yes." "You ignored direct orders from Colonel Hayes. Yes or no?" "Yes." "You destroyed 2 Apache helicopters worth $74 million. Yes or no?" "Yes." Davidson turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the defendant admits to every charge. This case is straightforward." Brennan stood. "Your Honor, may I?" Whitfield nodded. Brennan approached Riley. "Captain Thompson, why did you disobey those orders?" Riley took a breath. This was it. The moment everything came down to. "Because 500 men were going to die, sir, and I was the only one willing to try to save them. Even though you knew you'd be court-martialed." "Yes, sir." "Even though you knew you might die." "Yes, sir." "Why?" Riley looked out at the courtroom, at Morrison, at the soldiers from the valley, at Maria. "Because that's what soldiers do, sir. We don't leave anyone behind. And if that means breaking rules, if that means ending my career, then that's the price. But those men deserved someone willing to pay it." Brennan nodded slowly. "Captain Thompson, if you could go back and make a different choice, would you?" Riley didn't hesitate. "No, sir. I'd do it all again." even knowing the consequences, especially knowing the consequences. Brennan returned to his seat. Davidson stood for cross-examination. Captain Thompson, you say you're a soldier who doesn't leave anyone behind. But what about the chain of command? What about military discipline? If every soldier decided which orders to follow, we'd have chaos. Riley met his eyes. With respect, sir, I didn't decide which orders to follow. I decided that saving lives was more important than saving my career. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I stand, you put your personal judgment above the wisdom of your commanding officers. No, sir. I put 500 lives above everything else, including my career, including regulations, including myself. Davidson's jaw tightened. You realize you're making it impossible for this court to maintain military discipline. If we don't punish you, every soldier will think they can disobey orders whenever they feel justified. Riley leaned forward. Good. The courtroom gasped. Davidson stared at her. Excuse me. I said good sir. If my court-martial makes soldiers think twice before blindly following orders that will get people killed, then I'll go to prison proud. Because military discipline shouldn't mean abandoning our humanity. It should mean using our training and our courage to do what's right, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Davidson opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no response. No further questions, he said quietly. Riley stepped down from the stand. Whitfield called for closing arguments. Davidson stood first. He made his case regulations order discipline, the need for chain of command. He argued that Riley's actions, however well-intentioned, could not be allowed to stand without consequence. Then Brennan stood. Your Honor, this case isn't about regulations. It's about what kind of military we want to be. Do we want a military that values following orders over saving lives? Do we want soldiers who are so afraid of punishment that they let their brothers and sisters die rather than risk their careers? He gestured to the gallery full of soldiers. Every man in this courtroom who was in that valley owes their life to Captain Thompson. Not because she followed orders, but because she had the courage to break them. And if we punish her for that courage, we send a message to every soldier in this army. We tell them that rules matter more than people, that careers matter more than lives. That's not the army I want to serve in, and I don't think it's the army any of us want to serve in. Brennan sat down. The courtroom was silent. Whitfield looked at Riley. Captain Thompson, stand. Riley stood, her heart pounding. This court will recess to deliberate. We'll reconvene in 1 hour. Everyone stood as Whitfield left. The longest hour of Riley's life. She sat in the holding room, unable to think, unable to breathe properly. Morrison came in, sat beside her, didn't say anything, just sat there. Maria came in too, and Brennan. They waited together. At 1600 hours, the bailiff knocked on the door. Court's reconvening. Riley walked back into the courtroom on legs that didn't feel entirely solid. Everyone stood as Whitfield entered. He sat down, looked at Riley, and said, Captain Thompson, stand. Riley stood. Whitfield opened a folder. This is one of the most difficult cases I've ever presided over. On one hand, Captain Thompson violated multiple regulations. She disobeyed orders. She operated outside her authority. These are serious charges that cannot be taken lightly. Riley's stomach dropped. On the other hand, Whitfield continued, she saved 500 American lives. She demonstrated extraordinary courage, skill, and dedication to her fellow soldiers. She embodied the very values we claim to fight for. And he paused, looking directly at Riley. The law is clear. The regulations are clear. But so is the reality of what happened in that valley. Captain Thompson faced an impossible choice: follow orders and let 500 men die, or break orders and save them. She chose to save them. And because of that choice, 500 families still have their loved ones. Whitfield closed the folder. This court finds Captain Riley Thompson guilty of disobeying direct orders and unauthorized use of military equipment. Riley felt her knees go weak. However, Whitfield said, and his voice softened just slightly, this court also recognizes that Captain Thompson's actions, while technically illegal, were morally necessary. Therefore, her sentence is as follows: reduction in rank to first lieutenant forfeiture of 1 month's pay and a formal reprimand to be placed in her service record. Riley blinked. That was it. No discharge, no prison. Whitfield continued. Additionally, this court recommends that Captain Thompson be awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism in combat. And furthermore, this case will be forwarded to the Pentagon for review of current regulations regarding emergency rescue operations. The courtroom erupted. Soldiers were on their feet, cheering. Morrison was shouting something. Maria was crying. Whitfield banged his gavel. "Order, order in this court!" The room quieted down, but the energy was electric. Whitfield looked at Riley. "Captain, excuse me, Lieutenant Thompson. You broke the rules, and you saved lives. Both of those things are true. This court cannot condone disobedience, but it also cannot ignore results. You're free to go." He stood. Everyone stood. As Whitfield walked out, Riley stood there in shock, unable to move. Then Morrison was hugging her. Maria was hugging her. Soldiers she'd never met were shaking her hand, thanking her, crying. Brennan appeared beside her. "You did it." I don't understand. I thought Whitfield found a middle ground. You're technically guilty, but the punishment is minimal, and the recommendation for the DSC is huge. That's the second highest combat medal. If it goes through, you'll be a decorated hero, not a criminal. Riley couldn't process it. She'd expected prison. She'd expected a dishonorable discharge. Instead, she was free. The crowd was pushing toward her now, everyone wanting to congratulate her, to thank her. Eddie Martinez pushed through. "Ma'am, I just want to say, I know Eddie," Riley said, pulling him into a hug. "I know." Michael Martinez was right behind him. "Captain, I mean Lieutenant, you saved my life. I don't know how to—" "You're here," Riley said. "That's enough. That's everything." The captain from the valley appeared. "Ma'am, every man from that valley wanted me to tell you something. You're an honorary member of our unit now, forever. You flew into hell for us. We'll never forget that." Riley's vision was blurred with tears. "It was an honor, sir." Morrison pulled her aside as the crowd continued to celebrate. "Thompson Riley, I need to tell you something." "Sir." Morrison's eyes were wet. "I've been flying for 30 years. I've seen a lot of pilots. Good ones, great ones, legendary ones. But I've never seen anyone like you. What you did out there wasn't just brave. It was transcendent. You changed what's possible." Riley couldn't speak. Morrison handed her something, a piece of paper. "This is my recommendation letter, for the DSC. I wrote it last night. I wanted you to read it." Riley unfolded the paper. The first line read, "In 30 years of military service, I have never witnessed such extraordinary courage, skill, and dedication as demonstrated by First Lieutenant Riley Thompson." She read the rest through tears. Morrison had documented everything, every flight, every risk, every moment of heroism. He'd held nothing back. "Sir, this is—" "Thank you." "You earned every word," Morrison smiled. "And Riley, when this is all over, when the dust settles, I want you to know something. You didn't just save those soldiers. You saved me too. You reminded me why I became a pilot in the first place." The celebration continued for another hour. Eventually, the MPs escorted Riley back to her quarters to collect her things. She was no longer confined, no longer a prisoner. As she packed her duffel bag, there was a knock on the door. Maria walked in. "Hey. Hey. Hell of a day." "Yeah." Maria sat on the bed. So what now? You going to take some leave? Visit family. Riley zipped up her bag. I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead. Well, you should, because the media's going crazy outside the base. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, they're all out there wanting interviews. You're famous, Riley. I don't want to be famous. I just want to fly. You will. Give it time. Let things settle down. Maria paused. My wife still wants to cook you that dinner. Riley smiled. I'd like that. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Maria said, Riley, can I ask you something? Sure. When you were flying into that valley all those times, were you scared? Riley thought about it. Terrified. Every single time. But you did it anyway. Yeah. That's bravery, you know. Doing the thing even when you're scared. Or stupidity, Riley said with a small smile. Both, Maria agreed. Definitely both. Riley walked out of her quarters a free woman. The base was different now. Soldiers stopped to salute her as she passed. Some called out congratulations. Others just nodded with respect. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer just the woman who didn't belong. She was the pilot who'd saved 500 lives. 2 weeks later, Riley stood in the White House Rose Garden. She'd been flown to Washington on short notice, told only that, "Your presence is requested," and she'd worn her dress uniform freshly pressed, the ribbons and medals bright in the morning sun. Morrison was there. Maria, too. The captain from the valley, and a dozen of the soldiers she'd rescued. And at the podium, the President of the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, the President said, today we honor a soldier who embodies the very best of American values. Courage, sacrifice, dedication. First Lieutenant Riley Thompson flew 7 combat missions into hostile territory under direct enemy fire to rescue 500 American soldiers. She risked her life, her career, and her freedom to bring our men home. And today, it is my honor to award her the Distinguished Service Cross. The President gestured for Riley to step forward. She walked up on legs that felt like they might give out. The President pinned the medal to her uniform, a bronze cross with an eagle in the center second, only to the Medal of Honor. Then he leaned in and whispered, "Thank you for your service, Lieutenant. You make us all proud." Riley saluted. The President returned it. The crowd applauded. As Riley stepped back, she looked out at the faces. Morrison, tears running down his cheeks. Maria beaming. The soldiers from the valley standing at attention. And somewhere she thought her father was watching. I did it, Dad. I proved I was good enough. After the ceremony, reporters swarmed. Riley answered questions, shook hands, posed for photos. One reporter asked, "Lieutenant Thompson, what would you say to young women who want to serve in combat roles?" Riley thought about every obstacle she'd faced. Every person who'd told her she didn't belong. Every moment of doubt. "I'd say the sky doesn't care if you're a man or a woman," Riley said. "It only cares if you're good enough. So be good enough. And when someone tells you you can't do something, prove them wrong. Not with words, with action." Another reporter, "Do you have any regrets?" Riley shook her head. "Not one. Even though you were court-martialed, especially because I was court-martialed, it means I stood for something. It means I didn't just follow orders blindly. It means I chose people over regulations, and I'd make that choice again every single time." The questions continued, but Riley's mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about the valley, about the sound of rotors and gunfire, about Morrison's father's wings still in her pocket, about Eddie Martinez's letter creased from being read so many times. She was thinking about what it meant to be a soldier. Not the rules and regulations, not the rank or the medals, but the simple truth that had driven her into that valley 7 times. We don't leave anyone behind. That evening, back at her hotel, Riley stood at the window, looking out at Washington, D.C. Her phone rang. "Unknown number," she answered. "Lieutenant Thompson." "Riley, it's Colonel Brennan." "Sir, hello." "I wanted to let you know the Pentagon's forming a committee to review emergency rescue protocols. They want your input. They're calling it the Thompson Doctrine." Riley sat down hard. They're using your case as a template for new guidelines. When to authorize risky rescues. How to balance command authority with situational necessity. You didn't just save those soldiers, Riley. You changed policy. You changed the entire military. Riley couldn't speak. Brennan continued. They want you to testify before Congress next month to help shape these new regulations. Will you do it? Riley thought about all the soldiers who might face the same situation in the future. All the pilots who might have to make the same impossible choice. Yes, sir, she said. I'll do it. 3 months later, Riley returned to flight status. She stood on the flight line at Fort Liberty, the same place where this had all started, looking at a brand new Apache with her name stenciled on the side. Morrison walked up beside her. Nice bird. Yeah. You ready to fly again? Riley looked at the helicopter. She thought about everything that had happened. The court-martial, the medal, the new regulations that would bear her name. But mostly she thought about those 500 soldiers, about bringing them home. Yeah, Riley said. I'm ready. She climbed into the cockpit. The engines roared to life. And First Lieutenant Riley Thompson, pilot hero legend, lifted off into the sky that had never cared about her gender, only about whether she was good enough. She was. She always had been. And now finally, everyone else knew it too. Years later, Riley would receive hundreds of letters from young women who'd joined the military because of her story. She'd watch as more and more female pilots earned their wings and flew combat missions without facing the obstacles she'd endured. She'd attend reunions with the soldiers from the valley, watching their children grow up knowing she'd given them those futures. She'd stand at Morrison's retirement ceremony and hear him tell the story of the day a young captain taught an old warrior what courage really meant. And she'd fly. God, she'd fly. Because the sky didn't care that she was a woman. It only cared that she was brave enough to try. And in the end, that's all that mattered. Riley Thompson had flown into hell 7 times and brought everyone home. She'd broken every rule, defied every order, risked everything. And she'd proved once and for all that courage has no gender, only wings.